So in this video we continue as we try to look at storage, transport and storage in plants, but this time we want to talk about specifically on transpiration. So according to the first question there, it says define the term transpiration. So what exactly is transpiration? So you need to remember that transpiration, we can say that transpiration is the diffusion. So transpiration is the diffusion of water vapor from the leaves to the atmosphere through we can say through the stomata. So there are small openings or small spaces opening between the gut cell, and that's what we call transpiration. Is simply the diffusion of water vapor from the leaves to the atmosphere through the stomata. That is the opening that is found between the gut cells. So usually the gut cell look bean shaped like that, and what you're going to find is that so this is actually representing so in most cases this is what is going to be happening there. So you're going to find that the pair gut cell go in pairs. So there's a pair of what we call as being gut cells. Then the opening in the middle of the gut cells is what we call as being the stomata. So that's what we are calling. So now when water vapor is lost from the leaves to the atmosphere through the stomata, that is a process that we simply call as being diffusion. And remember, it is in form of water vapor, and that's what they wanted you to do in that exam, just to define the term diffusion. Then the B part there says that discuss factors. So they want us to discuss factors that affect the rate of transpiration. So remember, when you are answering questions in section B, they always tell you to say you need to paragraph your work. So it is always important, don't write your points in bullet point form, but make sure that you write them as complete sentences in paragraph. That's the way you are supposed to. But as I guide you, I'm just going to be highlighting in bullet point form. But when you are answering in the final exam, you write them in paragraph form. So it says discuss factors that affect the rate of transpiration. So there are a lot of factors that affect the rate of transpiration. In most cases, we talk about those we call as being environmental. We talk about environmental factors. Oftentimes when we are talking about this one, we normally refer to environmental factors, and environmental factors that we can simply talk about is simply what we call as being light intensity. Or if you want, you can just simply say light. Now when it comes to light intensity, so we can simply say light intensity can simply be the dimness or the brightness of light. And usually light intensity controls, this one actually controls, stomato closing and opening. So it actually controls the closing and opening of the stomata, and that is basically the idea about it. So meaning if the light intensity actually increases, it simply means that it will lead to a high rate of transpiration or water vapor being lost. So therefore, when you're explaining in the exam, two things are supposed to come to the fore. So because this question was actually, it says discuss factors that affect the rate of transpiration, it's like an open question. So you can talk about when there is actually low light, and you can simply talk about when you have got high light intensity. So you can simply talk about, so when there's high light, it simply means that when we talk about the rate of transpiration, it is actually going to be high. But of course when there's low light intensity, it simply means that the rate of transpiration will be low, as my arrow moving down there indicates. So that is what you need to talk about. So light intensity controls the stomatal closing and opening. So when there's high light intensity, it simply means that the stomatas are going to do what? they are actually going to open. So closing and opening here, that's what I meant to write. So closing and opening, so it will facilitate opening of the stomata. The gut cells in between will open, allowing to more water vapor to escape, and hence the rate of transpiration increases. Another factor that you can simply talk about that affects the rate of transpiration is what we call as being humidity. So what exactly is humidity? Humidity is the amount, so we can simply say is the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. So the amount of water vapor that is available in the atmosphere, that is what we call as being humidity. Now again, when it comes to humidity, when you are explaining, you can actually explain in terms of when you have got, sometimes you can have high humidity, and you can simply talk about when you have got low humidity. So when there's high humidity, what happens to the rate of transpiration? Well, when there's high humidity, there's high water vapor in the atmosphere, it simply means that there will be no diffusion gradient that is going to be created. And because there's no diffusion gradient, when the amount of water vapor is too high, it simply means that the rate of transpiration will be very low. But on the other hand, if at all the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere is very low, it means that the rate of transpiration will be very high. Why? Because a diffusion gradient is going to be created with the water vapor inside of the leaf and what you have outside. So when a diffusion gradient is created, then water will escape from the leaf into the atmosphere in a process we are calling as being transpiration. Another factor, which is, remember, all these I'm talking about are simply environmental factors. You can simply talk about temperature. Of course, you can be starting to define these terms if possible. So temperature, is the degree. So we can say the degree of hotness. So the degree of hotness or coldness of a substance. That's what you can simply say. So the degree of hotness or coldness of a substance, that is what we call as being temperature. Now, how does temperature affect, transpiration, the rate of transpiration? Again, when you're explaining this, you can explain when you have got high temperature and when you have got low temperature. So what happens? Well, temperature increases the kinetic energy of the molecules. So Ke of molecules, so I mean Ke, I mean kinetic energy of molecules. So when there's high temperature, it will increase the kinetic energy of the water molecules. And once the kinetic energy of the water molecules increased, it simply means that the rate of transpiration will be high. In other words, high temperature promotes high rate of transpiration because the water molecules will have enough kinetic energy, and hence they will be able to escape. But on the other hand, if you have got a low temperature, it means that you are reducing the kinetic energy of the water molecules, and that helps to reduce the rate of transpiration. So far I've talked about light intensity, humidity, and temperature, but you can explain these in the exam based on the points that I'm actually giving you. So we can also talk about another one. Let me just try to clear so that I can have enough space there so that you are able to see. Another factor, which is the fourth one that I can talk about, is what we call as being wind. Sometimes wind is what we simply call as being air movement. So yeah, so when there's sometimes there could be, again, there could be high speed of winds, or they could be low speed of winds. Now if the speed of wind or air movement is very high, it simply means that the rate of transpiration will be very high. But if at all the wind speed is low, it means that the rate of transpiration will be very low. You can think of it this way. Imagine if this is a leaf, and the water vapor that is surrounding the leaf, if there's wind movement, it is actually going to move away, and that is going to reduce the rate of transpiration that we have there.